Welcome to Broadside News. Tonight, we dissect a critical naval engagement in the Strait of Hormuz. At 03:04 hours, the Strait of Hormuz was absolute darkness. In the Combat Information Center of the USS Mason, the radar scope abruptly illuminated. A massive fireball erupted over Qeshm Island. Within moments, the entire strait came alive. IRGC speedboats surged from coastal hideaways. Unmanned aerial systems, electric bats, filled the night sky in unison. Alarm sirens blared across U.S. warships offshore. Washington's commanders grasped the gravity. They had inadvertently ignited a full-scale conflagration in the strait. For the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Strait of Hormuz functions as a strategic fortress. As smoke billowed from Qeshm Island's ruins, Tehran immediately activated its Naval Contingency Plan. Over 130 IRGC fast attack craft with compact fiberglass hulls emerged. These deadly vessels surged from subterranean bunkers and coastal caves. They navigated Iran's jagged shoreline. The IRGC speedboats wove through a maze of commercial oil tankers. These steel giants served as effective physical shields. They masked thermal signatures and radar traces. Shahed 136 drones, flying just meters above the waves, charged in synchronized patterns. Their mission was clear. They aimed to saturate sensors and blind the U.S. fleet with overwhelming numbers. At 03:07 hours, on the decks of Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the air hung thick. The scent of ozone and sea salt was palpable. The Aegis combat system, the fleet's digital core, was pushed to its operational limits. On tactical display screens, target vectors multiplied rapidly. A tactical coordinator's voice echoed, "Target multiple fast-moving objects, bearing 045 to 110. From the Mark 41 vertical launch system, white flames burst forth. ESSM missiles streaked into the darkness. These interceptors formed the fleet's primary defensive layer. Their purpose was to shred the drone swarm. They intercepted targets before close-range engagement. The siege of Hormuz had commenced. The operational situation in the Strait of Hormuz escalated. It shifted from routine harassment to a full-blown tactical nightmare. Tehran had launched a saturation attack. Shahed drones served as the vanguard force. They led the assault. Behind this screen of low-cost drones, the IRGC unleashed heavier ordnance. C-802 Noor anti-ship missiles followed. These missiles maintained an exceptionally low flight profile, below 10 meters. They virtually disappeared into sea clutter. This interference was generated by waves and saltwater spray. Iranian operators employed shadowing tactics. They adjusted missile trajectories. The missiles aligned with the hulls of massive commercial oil tankers. To radar operators aboard the USS Mason, incoming missiles appeared as extensions of civilian tankers. This deception persisted until the absolute last second. At 03:17 hours, inside the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, the tactical action officer observed. The radar screen filled with hundreds of red vectors. The response was immediate. A burst of lightning erupted from the Mark 41 VLS. The SM-6, the fleet's premier long-range effector, soared skyward. These missiles employ active radar seekers. They track targets with precision, X-ray scanning the horizon. Their mission was to neutralize the C-802s. They aimed to destroy them before they could breach civilian shipping lanes. But the sheer volume of the swarm was unprecedented. Amid deafening explosions, a Shahed 136 drone, charred but still propelled by its roaring engine, slipped through the interceptor fire. It was a harrowing sight. A jagged, black silhouette streaked toward the Mason's bridge. At a range under 2,000 yards, the ship's final line of defense activated. The Mark 15 Phalanx CIWS engaged. Its 20mm M61A1 Gatling cannon roared. It sounded like a giant chainsaw. It spewed 4,500 tungsten rounds per minute. This created a veritable wall of kinetic energy. The drone disintegrated into a fireball. It was just 50 yards from the ship's hull. This impact generated a massive water column. It crashed violently against the ship's side. At this precise moment, the U.S. command realized their adversary was no longer a simple foe. This was a treacherous mosquito stinging an elephant scenario. The giant, though brimming with firepower, would still bleed in the narrow confines of the Strait of Hormuz. At 03:22 hours, while the surface fleet was engaged, it was a desperate defense over the Gulf of Oman. EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft accelerated toward the strait. These aircraft carried no conventional bombs. They were armed with ALQ-99 jamming pods. These pods transformed the electromagnetic spectrum into a digital blizzard. In mere seconds, the swarm lost its collective cohesion. The Growlers unleashed high-powered jamming. This targeted the IRGC's coastal frequencies. It blinded their shore-based radars. More critically, it severed the encrypted data links between the speedboats. Iran's swarm had lost its queen bee. Capitalizing on this digital blindness, the true predators emerged. From the flight decks of amphibious assault ships, squadrons of AH-1Z Vipers launched. These were the Marine Corps' premier attack helicopters. They darted close to the water surface. These Sea Cobras flew in a terrain-following pattern. They remained just meters above the waves. This kept them below the detection range of any remaining radar. Using targeting systems with high-resolution infrared cameras and laser designators, Viper pilots initiated a systematic purge. They did not waste ammunition. They prioritized high-value targets. These included IRGC command ships and fast attack craft, especially those equipped with missile launchers. AGM-114 Hellfire missiles launched from the Vipers. Guided by invisible laser beams, they struck directly into the fuel tanks of Iranian vessels. Coordinated retreat. They feigned flight toward the jagged coastline of Qeshm Island. It appeared to be a victory for the U.S. Navy. But it was a deadly trap. As U.S. destroyers accelerated to maintain pressure, they were being lured. They pursued the fleet out of the shipping lane. They were enticed into a pre-designated killbox. This was a narrow stretch of water. There, the very geography became a weapon. Suddenly, the trap snapped shut. From fortified underground bunkers carved into coastal cliffs, Tehran unleashed a second wave. Qader and Kalash-Fars missiles launched. These were no longer simple drones. The Qader is a long-range, subsonic, sea-skimming cruise missile. The Kalash-Fars is a smart anti-ship cruise missile. It attacks from an almost vertical angle. At 58 hours, 80 brand-new assault boats surged from hidden coves. They attempted to encircle the U.S. fleet. It was a pincer movement. Amid the chaos of the saturation attack, the U.S. Aegis system hit a data bottleneck. There were too many targets. There was too much radar clutter from nearby islands. This was when London's secret card was played. For weeks, the HMS Dragon, a British Type 45 destroyer, had silently tailed the fleet. It operated in EMCON Alpha mode. This was absolute electronic silence. To Tehran's myriad sensors, the Dragon simply did not exist. But as U.S. radar systems struggled with the chaos, HMS Dragon spoke up. Its Samson multi-purpose radar, mounted atop its distinctive conical mast, illuminated the battle space. Unlike the U.S. Spy 1 radar, which can be affected by terrain-induced interference in confined spaces, Samson was purpose-built for this environment. Samson stripped away every layer of interference. It exposed the Qader missiles lurking just below the water's surface. The order was given. Fire Sea Viper. From the Dragon's silver A-50 VLS launch tubes, a barrage of Aster 15 and Aster 30 missiles streaked into the darkness. The Dragon created a steel dome. This dome covered the entire coalition fleet. Each of Iran's silver bullets was shot down from the sky. The IRGC realized too late. They had not lured the Americans into a trap. Instead, they had walked into a joint service ambush. This operation had been planned months in advance. While HMS Dragon held the defensive line, the coalition shifted. It transitioned from a defensive posture to a deadly offensive. For the IRGC, every minute the coalition was held up in the strait was valuable. It was another minute to reinforce defenses around the diamond of Qeshm Island, but they had made a fatal miscalculation. They believed they were fighting a ship-to-ship battle. In reality, the battle was directed from the shadows of the stratosphere. The pair of F-35 Lightning IIs, still patrolling in absolute stealth mode, activated their multi-mission advanced data link system. They were not just fighters. They were the central nervous system of the war. They bypassed Iran's jammed coastal communication channels. They transmitted high-resolution target coordinates directly to strike assets. At AO 400 hours, the precision strike began. Guided by the F-35's electro-optical targeting system, a wave of Tomahawk cruise missiles launched. They fired from distant submarines and the USS Mason. They began raining down on the mainland. They were not striking random targets. They attacked with surgical precision. Targets included underground command centers in Bandar Abbas, mobile missile launchers hidden in caves on Qeshm, and the satellite communication stations. These allowed Tehran to monitor the strait. One by one, Iran's eyes went dark. On the surface, IRGC speedboat commanders found themselves in a digital void. Their radar screens were nothing but streaks of static. Their radios screeched with meaningless white noise. They were blind, deaf, and trapped. They were in a waterway teeming with furious sea cobras and dragons. Tehran attempted to mount a third wave of attacks, but the infrastructure was gone. Precision strikes had severed the IRGC's regional command centers. The swarm had not only lost its queen bee, the hive itself was being dismantled brick by brick. As the sun began to rise on the horizon, the Iranian swarm, once a force of fear, was no longer an offensive threat. It was merely a collection of burning debris, fiberglass-reinforced plastic, and shattered dreams. They were scattered across the black waters of the Strait of Hormuz. The impregnable fortress had been breached from the inside out. The Strait of Hormuz is no longer a fortress. It has become a graveyard of burning synthetic plastic and oil slicks. The swarm has been dismantled, but the mission is only complete. The enemy's ability to regroup must be completely eliminated. In the final act, HMS Dragon maintained an absolute air defense dome. Its Samson radar continued to weave a protective net. This ensured any desperate long-range missiles, launched from inside Iran, were shot down. They were intercepted before reaching the fleet. Under this protection, the USS Mason and AH-1Z Viper squadrons moved in. They began the final cleanup. They systematically hunted down any remaining IRGC speedboats. In these narrow and treacherous waters, there was no room for survivors. Any lingering threat could pose guerrilla-style challenges to global shipping. At 0430 hours, the final decisive strike was launched. It struck Qeshm Island. This permanently neutralized Tehran's foothold on this strategic point. By sunrise, over 90 high-value military targets had been eliminated. Tonight's message is clear. In 21st century warfare, numbers are mere statistics. This holds true if you lack control of cyberspace. For the IRGC, this represents a generational disaster. It is the total loss of their naval assets. For the U.S., it was simply another Tuesday in Hormuz. This battle proves that modern combat isn't about who pulls the trigger first. It begins the moment you appear on the enemy's radar screen. It ends just seconds after you are spotted. As we analyze the wreckage of this clash,